Hi, this is Trent Brazier, one of your online librarians at Library Connect. Yes, I'm wearing a cardigan. I'm a librarian. That's not weird at all. Anyway, this video will give you a quick look at how to write and cite your discussion board posts in Campus Connect. The video is brought to you by me and the other friendly librarians at Library Connect. This video will not tell you how to find quality information and good resources. To do that, you can use our Start Research Here guide on Library Connect. Click it. Just keep in mind that the first result from Google might be the easiest to find, but it might not be a reliable resource. So since you don't want to spread lies to your classmates, at least I hope not, please double check your source and see if you can find that information in another source. If not, can you really trust it? Anywho, the real focus of this video is how to integrate sources into your discussion board posts and properly cite them using APA style. Before we get into the details of actually making citations, it's important to know when you actually need to cite. Rule of thumb, when in doubt, cite it. The purpose of citation is to give credit to the ideas of others. Maybe you thought that you only needed to cite when you are quoting someone directly, so when you use quotation marks. Not. Citation gives you credit to who gave you the information. Yes, you definitely need to cite when you're using a direct quote. You're using their ideas and their exact words. But you also need to cite even when you change the wording and just use their ideas. The only thing that doesn't require citation is common knowledge. Yeah, I know common knowledge is a pretty vague term, but you'll have to use your judgment. If you had to look up the information, it's probably not common knowledge. So cite it. Okay, so let's say I read some information from my discussion board post. I read an article from a digital magazine using our e-magazine service, Zinio. Here's a sentence that I thought was a really new and useful piece of information that I want to talk about in my discussion post. I love it. It makes me realize that programming is everywhere and a lot of people are doing it and they don't even know it. Before reading this, I thought the only people who did actual programming had job titles like software engineer or web developer. In my post, I want to explain more about how people are doing programming even though they don't actually realize it. I didn't know the information before, or at least I didn't think about it in that way, and I don't think many people in my class actually have either. It's not a fact almost everyone knows, like George Washington was the first president of the United States. That's not something I need to cite. Everybody knows that. So I would need to cite this piece of information because I actually didn't realize it until I read it. First though, I need to figure out how to work this idea into my post. There are literally a million different sentences I could use to introduce this idea, but really it boils down to two options: paraphrasing and quoting. Paraphrasing. To paraphrase is to rewrite the sentence into your own words. The information is still there, but the language and sentence structure are different. When paraphrasing, you need to make your sentence different enough. I know, different enough. Wow, that's another really vague statement. Perhaps an example would clarify. Going back to my programming example, I could rewrite that sentence something like this. Does my sentence use the idea from the original sentence? Is the wording in my sentence significantly different than the wording from the original? Now, let's look at a bad example. Look at it. You might be saying, what's wrong with that? Let me explain. If you look at the two sentences, yes, the wording is different. Well, kind of. A little bit. Not really. This is a technique of paraphrasing that takes words in one sentence and then just replaces them with similar words or synonyms. This happens a lot, but it's still plagiarism. The sentences are just too close. You might be saying, really? Yes, really. A technique to help you avoid this type of plagiarism is to flip the structure of the sentence around. The original sentence I used talked about programming at the end of the sentence, so in my paraphrase, why don't I talk about it at the beginning? Quoting. Quoting should only be used when necessary. Is the wording of the original sentence so amazing that there's no way you could possibly recreate it? Or did the author state it perfectly? Then use a quote. If not, then paraphrase it. More often than not, you should be paraphrasing. Using my original example, should I be quoting? In my opinion, it could go either way. I could use the paraphrase sentence, but the original does paint a picture in my head. I can see people using Photoshop and entering table information into Excel. If I were to quote the sentence, I would need to put quotation marks around it and use the exact wording. By default, you should probably be using paraphrasing. Don't quote something like, expectations around software have changed over time. This is not amazing wording. It doesn't deserve a quote. Paraphrase it. Still stuck on quoting and paraphrasing? Check out our paraphrasing page on our Avoiding Plagiarism guide. Thanks for joining me. You may have noticed I moved into the kitchen to talk about citation, right? To clean up your citations, huh? No? Okay. APA stands for the American Psychological Association. The APA is one organization of many that have developed their own citation styles. You may have used MLA or Chicago before, but there's tons of other ones out there. Each of these styles gives an exact way to tell your readers where the information in your writing originated from. Some use footnotes, while APA uses parentheses, often at the end of a sentence. No matter what citation style you use, the goal is to add credibility to your writing, to show that you didn't just make up all that information in your head. You're showing your readers that you've used ideas from other smart people, and that's why they should trust what you've written. It also lets your readers know the exact source that you used in case they want to look it up. Maybe your instructor or classmates want to know more information because your discussion post is so good. Like so good. So why do we use APA? Thankfully, it was decided that we would just use one citation style here. It actually helps out a lot. Instead of having to learn MLA for your literature courses or AMA for any medical courses, you can stick with one. You can become an expert at it, and hey, so can your librarians. APA is used primarily by social science fields, which many of our courses and programs fall into. One important takeaway about APA citation is that it's all, 100% of it, all based on this book. That's it. Everything else you read, what we have on our website, what's on other websites, what's in other books, is all based on this book. It lists all the rules. Well, not everything. It was published in 2010, and a lot has changed since 2010, especially when it comes to information formats. New technology means new ways to send information, which means you have to cite these new information formats. But if it hasn't been updated, how do you cite it? That's a cruel joke played on us librarians. Seriously, APA. Come on. In the case of citing a resource that isn't specifically listed in the APA manual, you have to make it up but use the spirit of the manual. You try to cite it like a similar type of source. So if you ever ask a librarian and they seem unsure, this might be why. Some things in APA just don't have clear-cut answers. Frustrating? Yeah. So how do you do this whole citation thing? In APA, there are 3 different parts. First, formatting. Second, reference list citations. And third, in-text citations. Good news. For the discussion board post, you don't have to worry about formatting. You don't have as much control within Campus Connect as you do in Microsoft Word. So you don't have to worry about the 1-inch margins or the 12-point Times New Roman font. You're limited with your formatting, so you don't need to worry about that one. That was easy. You do, however, need to complete the other parts of APA to properly cite your discussion board post. I would start with your reference list citations. These citations go at the end of your post, and it's essentially a list of all the sources that you cited in text. Don't worry, we'll get to in text later. Just know that if you read something but didn't incorporate that into your post at all, you don't need to cite it. If you list everything you look at, That's called a bibliography. APA doesn't want that. So if you looked up the word transcendentalism in Britannica online, but then never found a place to fit in that definition or use that word in your paper, you don't need to cite it on your reference list. Okay, let's look at the details of a reference list citation. If you're currently in Campus Connect writing a discussion board post, go to the end of it, hit enter, type the word references with a capital R, hit enter again. Congratulations, you've shown all of your readers now that this is the reference list section of your post. Alright, head move. We're getting serious here. Need a whiteboard. Now for each of the sources used in your paper, you need to make a separate reference list entry. What each citation looks like will differ depending on what type of source it is. So a website citation is going to look different than a book citation. Why? Because a website has different information than a book does. A website has a URL, while a book doesn't. A book has a publisher and a publishing location, while a website's not going to have that information. Remember, these specifics are important in case your reader wants to look up that information to find your original source. Did you use the first edition of a book from 2002 or did you use the second edition from 2013? The book could have changed a lot from one edition to the next, and your reader needs to know which one you used. Okay, I think you get that citations are going to look different depending on the format. So, how do you make a citation? You basically just copy another citation of that same source type. Where can you find these examples? The library's APA Citation Guide. Use the top left part of your page to look for the source type. For example, the programming quote that I used earlier was from an e-magazine called Bloomberg Businessweek in our Zinio database. So, although I use an e-magazine, the closest thing I can find is how to cite a magazine. So, I'm going to go to the journals, magazines, newspapers, and reports section. I'm brought to a new page with citation examples on the right side. I need to scroll down to the thing that closest fits my example. In this case, it would be a magazine article from a database. The general form is going to tell me what information I need to look up and the order that I need to put that information in to make my citation, as well as a few little formatting things. Below that, there's an example. So I need to look up the information for my citation. I need the author or authors' names, the date that the magazine was published, the title of the article, the title of the magazine, the volume and issue number of this particular issue, which page numbers my article appears on, and finally the URL of the magazine's website. If I can't find that last one using a search engine, then I can just put the database name instead. So I'll need to look at my source for this info. The author is Paul Ford. The date of the magazine is June 15th, 2015. The article title is the code issue, kind of a weird one, but this entire issue is just one big essay by my author. So don't worry, you'll run into plenty of weird things when you do APA. The magazine title is Bloomberg Businessweek. You usually find the volume number right next to the issue number. In this case, they only list an issue number, which makes me think that they probably don't have a volume number. I also get a clue because that issue number is really big, so they probably don't worry about volume numbers at all. So the volume number is 4431. The page numbers of the article go from 13 to 112. I didn't use all that in my article, but that's how long it is, so I need to list that. The URL is the web address of the magazine's homepage. I just found it using a search engine. No, I didn't actually get my article from there. Like I said, I got it from this Zinio database. But the thinking here is that that would be the easiest way to tell people to get there. They could just go to the website and purchase the article. So your goal in APA is to tell people the easiest way to get there, even though it might cost them money. Kind of weird since you didn't actually read the article there, but I don't make the rules. They didn't ask me. Now that I've found all the info, I can just plug that into the general format. So this becomes this. Done. Note that the general form and the example on the APA Citation Guide show indenting. This is something you can do in Microsoft Word, but not something that's very easy to do within your discussion board post. So that's something you can skip. Questions? Did you use a website that didn't have a date? Or maybe you found an ebook chapter as a PDF online and don't know how to cite it? Be sure to use our Ask a Librarian page for specific APA help or if you're just plain lost. You can search our FAQs, you can start an IM chat with us, you can text us, you can fill out our question form. We're asked a lot of questions about APA, so we've gotten pretty good at them. Whew! Tough part's over. Once you're done with the reference list citations, all you need to do are in-text citations. The good news is that 99% of the time, these follow the same pattern. There are two basic forms of in-text citation, and they relate back to whether you used a paraphrase or a quotation. If you paraphrased, this is what your citation will look like. That's it, author and year. It's that easy. So if I go back to my example, my in-text citation would look something like this. The general rule is to put the in-text citation at the end of your sentence, but before the period. When quoting, you follow the same example with a little added information. Follow this example. In this general form, you'd replace that # with the actual page number of the quote you found. Again, using my example, note that you find the parentheses inside the period. It always goes before the period. Okay, a couple variations. Quoting from websites and incorporating authors into your sentences. If you try to follow the example I just did with a website, you'll run into a little problem. Websites don't have page numbers. Oh yeah. So instead, what you do is you just replace that P period with para period and put the paragraph number. Unfortunately, this means you have to count from the top of the page down to whichever paragraph your quote appears in. Here's a quick example. This sample page, this wouldn't be too bad to cite a quote from. But if I had a page that had 80 paragraphs and I used a quote from the last one, I'd probably have to do a lot of counting. Not cool. Anyway, let's just say I found my quote from a website rather than a magazine. Here's what it would look like. There are different ways you can include in-text citation in your sentences. This is something that good writers do. They introduce the author into their sentence. It can work for both paraphrasing and quoting. Here's an example using quotation. Kind of strange that you have so much flexibility with the in-text citation, but the same information is included in there. I've got the author's name and I was able to throw in a little description about him. I could add even more to add more credibility, like say that he's an award-winning programmer or something like that. Note that wherever you put the author's name, the year should always follow in parentheses, and the page or paragraph number should always come directly after the quote, usually right at the end of the sentence. Seems a bit complicated, but it offers some advantages. First, it breaks up the writing style, which makes it a little easier on your readers. More importantly, one of the most common APA questions we get is if I use multiple sentences from the same author, do I need to put a citation after each one? The answer is yes. You need to show that all of this information came from an outside source. However, you can avoid writing Ford 2015, Ford 2015, Ford 2015. The solution is to incorporate the author into your paragraph. So, if I have 3 sentences in a row that come from the same source, I can introduce the author in the first one and keep talking about what that author said in the next 2. If the reader is able to understand that all of this comes back from that first person you cited, then you only need to cite once. Let me show you what I mean using my example. In the second and third sentences, I'm telling the readers that I'm using information from the same source, so that citation carries over. Last check before you're done. Does everything cited in your reference list also show up as an in-text citation somewhere? And does every in-text citation match up with a reference list entry? If the answer is yes, congrats, you're done. If not, you're going to have to go back and make sure that your citations match up. This is it, putting it all together. I've read my source, kept the quotes I wanted, paraphrased other information that I wanted to use, made my reference list citations, and made my in-text citations. Here's what a discussion post looks like when properly written and cited. Okay, last note regarding my example in this whole video. It may have worked for me, but it might not work for your instructors. They set the expectations, they don't ask me. So make sure you ask them before you say, oh, Trent said in the video I could do that, yeah. If you have any library or citation related questions, check out your campus library or find us here.